What deadly secrets lurk beneath the glittering gala at Nasse House? In the idyllic village of Nasse House, a playful murder hunt spirals into real bloodshed, and only Hercule Poirot's brilliant mind can unravel the truth. Why are priceless artifacts vanishing across England's estates, each theft marked by cryptic codes? Who is the shadowy bandit pulling the strings? As the clock ticks toward a final, audacious heist, can Poirot expose a ruthless syndicate before the curtain falls on another victim? Step into a chilling tale of deception, deduction, and a detective who sees what others miss. Chapter 1. The Summons to Nasse House. The fog clung to London like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of hooves and the rumble of motor cars along Baker Street. Inside his impeccably ordered apartment, Hercule Poirot sat at a polished mahogany desk, his small, precise hands arranging a stack of correspondence with the care of a jeweller sorting gems. The room was a study in symmetry. A crystal inkwell gleamed beside a neatly sharpened pencil. A silver letter opener lay parallel to a leather blotter, and a single white rose in a vase lent a touch of elegance to the otherwise austere space. Poirot's moustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he scanned a letter from a client. A tedious matter of a misplaced will, hardly worthy of his little grey cells. He sighed, his green eyes glinting with a restless hunger for a puzzle more intricate, more formidable. The telephone's shrill ring shattered the silence, and Poirot's head tilted, as if the sound itself were a clue. He lifted the receiver with a flourish, his voice smooth and accented. "Hallo, this is Hercule Poirot." "Hercule! Oh, thank heavens you're there!" The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Ariadne Oliver, the crime novelist whose exuberance was matched only by her penchant for melodrama. Her words tumbled out in a breathless rush, like apples spilling from a basket. "You must come at once, Hercule. I'm at Nasse House, in Nasse House, organizing this dreadful gala, and I'm positively certain something's wrong. Terribly wrong." Poirot's eyebrows arched, his interest piqued. "Madame Oliver, what is this terribly wrong you speak of?" "A gala. It is a festive occasion, non? What troubles you?" "It's not the gala itself, though heaven knows it's a nightmare. Hundreds of guests, caterers, who can't tell a soufflé from a sponge cake, and Sir George Stubbs changing the plans every 5 minutes. Ariadne's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's the murder hunt. I've written it, you see, a game for the Fête, where guests follow clues to find a body. But I've got this feeling, Hercule, this prickling at the back of my neck, like one of my own novels turning real. I saw someone last night lurking near the boathouse, and there are these notes I found with strange symbols. I don't like it one bit." Poirot leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Ariadne's instincts, though prone to theatricality, were not to be dismissed. She had a nose for trouble, much like his own, albeit less disciplined. "Symbols, you say? Describe them to me, Silver Plate." "Oh, I can't make head or tail of them, dots and lines like some child's scribble, but deliberate, you know. I found one tucked into the gala's programme, and another near the rose garden. Hercule, I need you here. Sir George and Lady Stubbs are hosting, and the whole county's coming, but I swear there's a shadow over this place. Will you come?" Poirot's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. A shadow, a code, a gala with secrets. This was no mundane matter of lost wills. "Very well, Madame Oliver. Hercule Poirot will arrive at Nasse House this afternoon. Do not touch these notes until I see them. And if you please, keep your eyes open and your imagination, perhaps, a little less florissant." Ariadne's laugh was half relieved, half nervous. "You're a lifesaver, Hercule. Hurry, won't you?" As he hung up, Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. A murder hunt, a cryptic note, a lurking figure, these were the threads of a tapestry he longed to unravel. He rose, adjusting his immaculate black tie, and summoned his valet George to pack a small case. The train to Nasse House left in 2 hours, and Hercule Poirot was not a man to be late. The journey to Nasse House was a study in contrasts. London's grey bustle gave way to the rolling green hills of Devon, where hedgerows framed fields dotted with grazing sheep. The train's rhythmic clatter soothed Poirot's mind, allowing his thoughts to arrange themselves as neatly as his desk. Ariadne's call had stirred something in him, a sense that this gala, with its glittering surface, concealed a darkness far more sinister than a parlour game. He recalled her novels, their plots as tangled as a ball of yarn, and wondered if her intuition had stumbled upon a real crime. The symbols she described, dots and lines, suggested a cipher, perhaps one used by smugglers or spies in days past. His fingers twitched, eager to examine them. As the train pulled into Nasse House' quaint station, Poirot stepped onto the platform, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dust. The air was crisp, scented with hay and the faint tang of the nearby river. The village lay before him, a postcard of English charm, thatched cottages with roses climbing their walls, a church spire piercing the sky, and a winding lane leading to Nasse House, its chimneys just visible above a copse of oaks. But Poirot's sharp eyes caught a discordant note, a scrap of paper caught in a hedge, fluttering like a trapped bird. He bent to retrieve it, his gloved fingers careful not to smudge the ink. The paper was small, no larger than a calling card, and bore a series of marks, 3 dots in a triangle, a diagonal line crossed by a smaller one, and a single letter T scrawled in a hurried hand. To an ordinary eye, it might be rubbish, a child's doodle perhaps, but to Poirot it was a clue, deliberate and tantalizing. He tucked it into his waistcoat pocket, his mind already turning over possibilities. A cipher, yes, but for what purpose? A message, a map, or a warning? His little grey cells hummed with anticipation. A carriage awaited him, sent by Ariadne, its driver, a ruddy-faced man named Tom who tipped his cap with a grin. "Mr. Poirot, is it? Mrs. Oliver's been in a right tizzy. Says you're the man to sort out her troubles. Hop in, sir. Nasse House ain't far." The drive to Nasse House was brief but scenic, the road winding through meadows where wildflowers danced in the breeze. Poirot's gaze remained sharp, noting the details. A gardener pausing to watch the carriage, his hands stained with ink rather than soil. A maid hurrying along the path, her eyes darting nervously. A distant boathouse by the river, its door ajar. These were not mere observations, but pieces of a puzzle, each to be fitted into place with care. Nasse House emerged like a vision from a novel, its Georgian facade all symmetry and grace, with ivy clinging to its stone walls, and windows glinting like watchful eyes. The grounds were a riot of colour, rose gardens, manicured lawns, and a marquee being erected for the gala, its white canvas flapping in the wind. Poirot stepped from the carriage, his small frame dwarfed by the estate's grandeur, yet his presence commanded attention. Ariadne Oliver was waiting at the entrance, her auburn hair escaping its pins, her scarf trailing like a comet's tail. "Hercule!" she exclaimed, seizing his arm as if he were a lifeboat in a storm. "You're here at last. I'm at my wits' end. Come, let me show you everything before I lose my nerve entirely." She led him into the grand hall, where servants bustled, arranging flowers and polishing silver for the gala. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and lavender, and a chandelier sparkled overhead, casting prisms of light across marble floors. Ariadne's voice was a whirlwind as she described the murder hunt, a game where guests would follow clues through the estate to discover a body in the boathouse, played by a local girl guide named Marlene Tucker. "It's all very theatrical," she said, waving a hand. "A dagger here, a rope there, clues hidden in the gardens. But these notes, Hercule, they're not part of my script." She produced 2 scraps of paper from her handbag, both similar to the one Poirot had found, clusters of dots, intersecting lines, and a single letter, B on one, S on the other. "I found this one in the gala programme," she said, pointing to the B, "and this one near the rose garden, tucked under a bench. They're not mine, Hercule, and I swear I saw someone skulking by the boathouse last night. A shadow, all in black, like something out of one of my books." Poirot examined the notes, his eyes narrowing. The symbols were deliberate, arranged in a pattern that suggested a code rather than a random scribble. He recalled a case from his early years. A smuggling ring that used similar marks to signal drop points along the coast. "Madame Oliver," he said, his voice calm but firm, "these are not the work of a prankster. They are a cipher, perhaps a message between conspirators. Tell me, who has access to the gala's plans?" Ariadne's eyes widened. "Everyone, practically. Sir George and Lady Stubbs, of course. They're the hosts. Then there's the staff, the caterers, the committee from the village. Oh, and that dreadful auctioneer, Mr. Legge, who's been poking about the artifacts. And don't get me started on the gardeners. They're always muttering about something." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign his mind was at work. "And this boathouse? Take me there, if you please. I wish to see where your shadow was lurking." The boathouse was a short walk from the main house, nestled by the river's edge, where willows dipped their branches into the water. The structure was weathered but sturdy, its wooden walls streaked with moss, its door creaking on rusty hinges. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of rope and river mud. A single window let in a sliver of light, illuminating a coil of rope and a prop dagger laid out for the murder hunt. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the space, noting scuff marks in the dust and a faint scratch on the doorframe. A cluster of dots, identical to those on the notes. "Tiens," he murmured, bending to examine the marks. "This is no coincidence. Someone has been here, and not for your game, Madame Oliver." Ariadne shivered, wrapping her scarf tighter. "You think it's connected to the thefts, don't you? I read about them in the papers. Silver candlesticks, a cameo brooch, all from estates nearby. Do you think the thief is here, at Nasse House?" Poirot straightened, his expression unreadable. "A thief, perhaps, or something more. These symbols suggest a mind that is organized, deliberate. They are planning something, and your gala, with its crowds and chaos, is the perfect stage." As they returned to the house, the sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows across the lawn. The marquee was nearly complete, its canvas glowing under lanterns strung like fireflies. Guests would arrive tomorrow, a glittering throng of aristocrats, locals, and curious outsiders, all unaware of the darkness Poirot sensed beneath the festivities. He paused by the rose garden, his eyes catching a glint of metal under a bench. A hairpin, bent as if used to pick a lock. He pocketed it, his mind racing. Back in the hall, Ariadne introduced him to Sir George Stubbs, a bluff, red-faced man with a booming laugh, and his wife, Lady Hattie, a striking woman with dark eyes and a nervous smile. "Mr. Poirot!" Sir George exclaimed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Heard you're the best detective in London. Hope you're here to enjoy the gala, not chase ghosts." Poirot smiled politely, his eyes flicking to Lady Hattie, who toyed with a sapphire pendant at her throat. "A gala is a place for enjoyment, but also for observation. One never knows what secrets may hide in plain sight." Lady Hattie's fingers stilled, and for a moment her gaze met his, sharp and wary. Poirot filed the reaction away, his little grey cells cataloguing every detail. The pendant, he noted, matched the description of a stolen item from a nearby estate. A coincidence, or something more? As Ariadne led him to his guest room, a cosy chamber overlooking the river, Poirot's thoughts were a whirl of connections. The symbols, the thefts, the boathouse, the hairpin, all pointed to a plot far grander than a village fête. He sat at a small desk, spreading the 3 scraps of paper before him. The dots and lines formed a pattern, a cipher he recognized from his studies of historical codes. It was a variation of a Polybius square, used by smugglers to encode locations and times. His fingers traced the marks, his mind testing combinations. The letters TBS could be initials, or they could be keys to the cipher's grid. After an hour of meticulous work, he deciphered a fragment, sapphire. His heart quickened. The word pointed to a target, and Lady Hattie's pendant was no mere trinket. The gala, with its murder hunt and crowded festivities, was the perfect cover for a theft, or something darker. He recalled Ariadne's mention of the boathouse shadow, the whispered 9th hour, overheard by the girl guide. Tomorrow, at 9 o'clock, something would happen, and Hercule Poirot would be ready. He stood, adjusting his tie in the mirror, his reflection calm but resolute. The game, as his old friend Hastings might say, was afoot. The scrap of paper from the platform, the notes from Ariadne, the marks in the boathouse, they were threads in a tapestry of crime, and Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, would unravel them. He smiled, his moustache curling slightly. Nasse House was no mere stage for a gala. It was a battlefield of wits, and Hercule Poirot was armed with the sharpest weapon of all, his mind. As he blew out the candle and settled into bed, the distant hoot of an owl echoed through the night. The gala loomed, its glitter hiding a shadow, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle that would soon turn deadly. Chapter 2. The Gala's Glittering Facade. The sun hung low over Nassecombe, bathing the sprawling lawns of Nasse House in a golden sheen that made the estate's white stone walls gleam like polished ivory. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit with a lavender cravat, stepped from the gravel drive onto the manicured grass, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dew-kissed, oysterel turf. The air was thick with the scent of blooming roses and freshly cut lavender, mingling with the faint tang of champagne carried on the breeze. From the grand terrace, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses spilled out, a symphony of opulence that promised a night of revelry. Yet beneath the glittering surface, Poirot's sharp eyes caught the undercurrents of unease, furtive glances, a hand trembling as it clutched a flute, a shadow flitting behind a topiary. This was no ordinary gala, and he, Hercule Poirot, was not here merely to sip wine and admire the view. Ariadne Oliver awaited him at the terrace's edge, her figure unmistakable even in the crowd. Her wild auburn hair, barely tamed by a wide-brimmed hat, adorned with peacock feathers, bobbed as she waved him over with the enthusiasm of a schoolgirl, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. "Poirot! Thank heavens you're here!" she exclaimed, her voice cutting through the chatter like a stage director's call. "This place is positively crawling with oddities, and I don't mean the floral arrangements. Come, come, let me show you the madness of this so-called murder hunt." Poirot followed, his cane tapping a measured rhythm on the stone path as Ariadne led him through the throng. The gala was a spectacle of decadence. Ladies in silk gowns that shimmered like liquid moonlight, gentlemen in tails with cufflinks that caught the chandelier's glow, and servants weaving through with silver trays of canapes and crystal flutes. A string quartet played a lilting Vivaldi piece, the notes dancing over the crowd like fireflies. At the centre of the lawn, a marquee housed the murder hunt staging area, its crimson drapes fluttering in the evening breeze. Props for the game, a velvet noose, a dagger with a ruby-encrusted hilt, and a mannequin draped in a blood-spattered shawl, stood as macabre centerpieces, drawing gasps and giggles from the guests. "It's all very theatrical, no?" Poirot remarked, his moustache twitching as he surveyed the scene. "But, Madame Oliver, you spoke of a shadow, a disturbance. What precisely troubles you?" Ariadne's fingers twisted the edge of her shawl, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's the atmosphere, Poirot. Something's off. I saw a man last night, near the boathouse, cloaked and skulking like some Gothic villain. And then there's this." She thrust a crumpled note into his hand, its edges frayed as if torn from a larger sheet. The paper bore a series of dots and lines, arranged in a pattern that seemed random yet deliberate, like a cipher from a bygone era. "I found it slipped under my door this morning. It's not part of the murder hunt clues. I wrote those myself." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he smoothed the note, his fingers tracing the cryptic symbols. "A code, perhaps," he murmured, "or a warning. We shall see." He tucked the paper into his waistcoat pocket, his gaze sweeping the crowd. A waiter passed, his tray laden with oysters. But Poirot noted the man's gloves, one black, one grey, an odd mismatch for such a meticulous affair. Across the lawn, a woman in a sapphire blue gown clutched a fan, her eyes darting toward the boathouse, its silhouette looming against the fading light. And there, by the marquee, Lady Hattie Stubbs, the hostess, stood in a gown of emerald silk, her beauty radiant, yet her posture rigid, as if braced for an unseen blow. "Tell me, madame," Poirot said, turning back to Ariadne, "this murder hunt of yours, what is its design?" Ariadne's face lit up, her anxiety momentarily eclipsed by her passion for drama. "Oh, it's splendidly gruesome. The guests follow a trail of clues across the estate to solve a staged murder. The victim is Marlene Tucker, a local girl guide who's to be found in the boathouse, strangled by a velvet cord. The clues are hidden in plain sight. Riddles in the programs, symbols on props, even a coded message in the dessert menu. But Poirot, I swear something's been tampered with. The clues I wrote, they've been altered, twisted into something darker." Poirot's brow furrowed, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. "Show me these clues, madame. Let us see what mischief hides beneath this glittering facade." They moved to the marquee, where a table displayed the murder hunt's paraphernalia. A map of the estate marked with red X's, a stack of printed programs, and a brass key etched with a rose. Ariadne handed Poirot a program, its cover embossed with gold filigree. "Here," she said, pointing to a riddle printed inside. "By the water's edge, where shadows creep, a treasure lies where secrets sleep. Seek the lock that holds no key, and find the truth 'neath willow tree." Poirot read it twice, his lips pursed. "This is your work, madame?" Ariadne shook her head. "Not entirely. The first 2 lines are mine, but the rest, it's been changed. My version mentioned a fountain, not a willow tree, and look here." She flipped to the back of the program, where a faint pencil mark traced a series of dots and lines, identical to the note she'd given him. "This wasn't here when I approved the proofs." Poirot's fingers drummed against his cane, his eyes narrowing. "A pattern emerges. These symbols, they are not random. They remind me of a cipher used by smugglers in the 18th century, a code for marking stolen goods. Tell me, madame, has there been any talk of thefts in Nasse House?" Ariadne's eyes widened. "Good heavens, yes! Just last week, a sapphire pendant vanished from the vicarage, and a silver chalice was taken from the church. The police called them isolated incidents, but—" Her voice trailed off, her hand clutching Poirot's arm. "You think it's connected?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone measured, but his mind racing. "The gala, this murder hunt, it is a perfect stage for deception. A crowd to hide in, props to conceal, and clues to mislead. We must be vigilant." As they spoke, the crowd parted to reveal Sir George Stubbs, the estate's jovial owner, his face flushed from champagne and his laugh booming across the lawn. "Poirot, old chap," he called, striding over with a glass in hand. "What do you make of our little spectacle? Hattie's outdone herself, hasn't she?" He gestured toward Lady Stubbs, who now stood near a fountain, her emerald gown catching the light like a jewel. Yet her eyes, Poirot noted, flicked repeatedly toward the boathouse, her fingers twisting a pearl bracelet. "Magnifique," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "But Sir George, tell me of this boathouse. It seems to draw much attention." Sir George's smile faltered, a shadow crossing his ruddy face. "Oh, just a damp old shed, really. We've locked it up for the game. Marlene's in there, playing dead for the hunt. Nothing to see until the big reveal." He clapped Poirot on the shoulder, a touch too forceful, and turned to greet another guest. Poirot's gaze lingered on the boathouse, its weathered doors half hidden by ivy. "Madame Oliver," he said softly, "we must visit this boathouse. But first, let us examine the dessert menu. If your clues have been altered, perhaps the answer lies in the sweets." Ariadne led him to the dining tent, where tables groaned under platters of eclairs, macarons, and a towering croquembouche. The dessert menu, printed on cream cardstock, listed confections with playful names: blood-red panna cotta, strangled strawberry tart. But tucked among the flourishes was a handwritten note, its ink smudged as if written in haste. 9 dots, 3 lines under the willow's shade. Poirot's pulse quickened. The symbols matched those on Ariadne's note in the program, but the reference to the willow tree echoed the altered riddle. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the tent. Across the room, a man in a waiter's uniform, the same with mismatched gloves, slipped behind a curtain, his tray abandoned. Poirot's gaze darted to Lady Stubbs, now absent from the fountain, and then to a young woman in a violet gown, her fan snapping shut as she whispered to a man with a scar above his brow. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. "Madam," Poirot said, turning to Ariadne, "we must act swiftly. The willow tree, the boathouse, these symbols, they are threads in a tapestry of deceit. I suspect a theft is planned, perhaps tonight, under the guise of your murder hunt." Ariadne gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "A theft? Here? But what could they want? The gala's jewels are all accounted for, and the auction isn't until tomorrow." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Not jewels, madame. Something older, rarer. The vicarage's sapphire pendant, the church's chalice. These are no random thefts. They are relics, pieces of a larger scheme. And this gala, with its chaos and costumes, is the perfect stage for their next act." He moved toward the marquee, his steps purposeful, but paused as a gust of wind carried a scrap of paper across his path. He stooped to retrieve it, his fingers brushing the damp grass. The paper bore a single line of text, written in the same smudged ink: "The sapphire sleeps where the willow weeps." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. The sapphire pendant, stolen last week, was here, hidden at Nasse House, woven into the murder hunt's twisted game. He turned to Ariadne, his voice low and urgent. "Madame, we must find this willow tree. The gala's glitter hides a darker truth, and I, Hercule Poirot, will unmask it before the night is through." The chapter closed with the distant toll of a church bell, its chime echoing over the estate like a warning. The gala sparkled on, its laughter and music a fragile veneer over the shadows creeping closer, ready to strike. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Boathouse. The sun hung low over Nassecombe, casting a golden haze across the sprawling lawns of Nasse House. The gala's laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the air, a cheerful cacophony that felt oddly distant, as Hercule Poirot made his way toward the boathouse. The structure loomed at the edge of the estate, half hidden by a copse of willows, their drooping branches trailing like fingers over the glassy surface of the river. The boathouse was the centerpiece of Ariadne Oliver's murder hunt, the stage where the victim would be discovered in her carefully scripted game. Yet, as Poirot's polished shoes crunched against the gravel path, a prickle of unease stirred in his meticulous mind. Ariadne's cryptic warnings, the scrap of paper with its dots and lines, and the waiter's mismatched gloves from the gala's glittering chaos. Each detail whispered of something more sinister than a playful charade. The boathouse was a weathered relic, its timbers stained dark by years of river mist. Ivy clung to its walls, curling like veins over the warped planks. The air grew heavier as Poirot approached, thick with the scent of damp wood and something sharper, rope perhaps, or the faint metallic tang of rust. The door, slightly ajar, creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dim interior where sunlight struggled to pierce the grimy windows. Inside, the space felt claustrophobic, the ceiling low and sagging, the floorboards groaning underfoot. A single lantern hung from a rusted hook, its feeble glow swaying with the draught. In the corner, a coil of hemp rope lay beside a wooden chair, and a table held props for the murder hunt. A velvet noose, a dagger ruby-encrusted hilt, and a bottle labelled poison in Ariadne's florid handwriting. The theatricality was unmistakable, but Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with suspicion. This was no mere stage. "Bonjour, mademoiselle," Poirot called softly, his voice steady despite the oppressive stillness. He had been told the victim, Marlene Tucker, a young girl guide with a penchant for dramatics, would be waiting here to rehearse her role. The silence that answered him was not the playful quiet of a girl hiding for effect. It was heavier, wrong. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting the scuff marks on the floor, the faint smear of mud near the table, and a single glove, black leather too fine for a gardener, discarded in the shadows. His fingers twitched toward his pocket, where the scrap of paper from the train platform rested, its cryptic symbols, 3 dots, a line, 2 dots, still unsolved. Marlene, he tried again, stepping deeper into the boathouse. The air seemed to thicken, and a faint sound, a muffled giggle perhaps, came from behind a tarp-covered crate. Poirot's moustache twitched. He moved cautiously, his cane tapping the floorboards, each step deliberate. "Mademoiselle Tucker, it is I, Hercule Poirot. There is no need for games with me." The giggle stopped abruptly, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. Poirot paused, his hand hovering over the tarp. The fabric was coarse, dusted with mildew, and as he pulled it aside, he saw her, Marlene, slumped against the crate, her Girl Guide uniform askew, her freckled face pale but alive. Her eyes, wide with something between fear and excitement, met his. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to scare you. I was just practicing, you know, for the murder hunt. Mrs. Oliver said to make it convincing." Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained sharp. "Convincing, oui, but perhaps not so convincing as to alarm an old man like myself." He offered a small smile, studying her. Marlene was no more than 15, her auburn hair tied in a messy braid, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sash. Yet there was something in her posture, a tension, a flicker of unease, that belied her playful tone. "Tell me, mademoiselle, what is it you practice here, alone in this charming place?" Marlene hesitated, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to burst through. "It's just the game, sir. I'm supposed to be the victim, see? Lie here, look dead, let the guests find me. Mrs. Oliver gave me this." She held up a crumpled script, its pages marked with red ink. But her voice dropped to a whisper. "I heard something last night, when I was checking the props. Voices outside by the river. They were talking about the 9th hour, and a shadowy bandit. I thought it was part of the game, but it didn't sound right." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind latching onto her words. The 9th hour, and this shadowy bandit? What did these voices say, precisely? Marlene bit her lip, her fingers twisting the script. "I couldn't hear much. It was low, like they didn't want to be heard. Something about a key and moving something heavy. I saw a man, too, just for a second. He had a scarf over his face, like in those old detective stories. I thought maybe Mrs. Oliver hired actors, but," she shivered, her bravado crumbling, "it felt real, Monsieur Poirot. Too real?" Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this scarf, mademoiselle, did it have any markings? Any colours, perhaps?" "It was dark," she said, frowning. "Maybe blue? Or black. I couldn't tell, but there was something shiny on it, like a pin with dots and lines." Her eyes widened as she spoke, as if the memory had sharpened in her mind. "Like that paper you're holding." Poirot's hand instinctively went to his pocket, but he did not draw out the scrap. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice calm but firm. "Mademoiselle, you must tell no one of this, not Mrs. Oliver, not your friends. You will continue with the murder hunt, oui, but you will watch, and you will listen. If you see this man again, or hear of this 9th hour, you come to Poirot at once. Comprenez-vous? Marlene nodded, her face a mix of fear and awe. Yes, sir. I mean, oui, sir. She managed a weak smile, but it faltered as a shadow passed over the window. A trick of the light, perhaps, or something more. Poirot's head snapped toward the movement, but the window revealed only the swaying willows outside. Come, he said, offering his arm, we will return to the gala. It is not safe for you to remain here alone. As they stepped toward the door, Poirot's mind raced. The 9th hour, 9 o'clock perhaps tonight, and the shadowy bandit, with a pin matching the cryptic symbols. The scrap of paper in his pocket felt heavier now, its dots and lines a puzzle he was determined to solve. He recalled Ariadne's mention of a stolen sapphire pendant from a nearby estate, its disappearance cloaked in similar coded messages. Was this boathouse, this murder hunt, the stage for another theft, or something darker? The gala's music grew louder as they emerged into the sunlight, the laughter of guests a stark contrast to the boathouse's gloom. Marlene hurried ahead, eager to rejoin her friends, but Poirot lingered, his eyes scanning the crowd. The waiter with the mismatched gloves was nowhere to be seen, but a woman in a saffron shawl stood near the rose garden, her face half hidden by a fan. She turned away as Poirot's gaze met hers, her movements too deliberate to be casual. He made a mental note, his little grey cells cataloguing every detail. Back at the boathouse, Poirot returned alone, determined to examine the scene more closely. The lantern's glow seemed dimmer now, the shadows deeper. He knelt by the scuff marks, noting their irregular pattern. 2 sets, one heavier, as if someone had dragged something across the floor. The glove in the corner caught his eye again. He picked it up with his handkerchief, turning it over. The leather was supple, expensive, and stitched into the lining was a tiny emblem. 3 dots, a line, 2 dots, the same as the paper, the same as Marlene's description of the bandit's pin. Poirot's pulse quickened, but he remained composed, slipping the glove into his pocket. He moved to the table, examining the props. The velvet noose was meticulously knotted, its fibres pristine except for a single strand of blonde hair caught in the weave. Not Marlene's auburn braid, but someone else's. The dagger's hilt gleamed, its rubies catching the lantern's light, but its blade was dull, a stage prop. The poison bottle, however, was real, its cork loose and a faint chemical scent lingering. Poirot's nose wrinkled. Not a prop, but a tool. He stepped outside, his eyes drawn to the riverbank where Marlene had heard the voices. The mud was soft, marked with footprints, 2 pairs, one large, one smaller, leading toward the willows. He followed them, his cane sinking slightly into the earth, until he reached a cluster of reeds. Hidden among them was a small tin box, its lid rusted but intact. Inside, a folded note bore the same cryptic symbols, along with a single word, Greystone. Poirot's memory stirred. Greystone was an alias, a smuggler's name from a case years ago, linked to a syndicate that trafficked in stolen artifacts. The sapphire pendant, the coded messages, the shadowy bandit, it was all connected. The gala's music swelled, a waltz now, pulling Poirot's attention back to the estate. He tucked the note into his pocket, his mind racing. The 9th hour was approaching, and the boathouse, he suspected, was more than a stage for Ariadne's game. It was a nexus, a place where the syndicate's plans converged. He started back toward the gala, determined to find Ariadne and warn her, but a scream shattered the air, high, piercing, and unmistakably real. Poirot ran, his cane forgotten, his heart pounding. The scream came from the boathouse. He burst through the door, the lantern now extinguished, the room plunged into darkness. His eyes adjusted, and there, in the corner where Marlene had sat, was her body, slumped, lifeless, a velvet noose tight around her neck. Her eyes stared blankly, her script crumpled beside her. The props were scattered, the dagger missing, the poison bottle tipped over, its contents pooling on the floor. Poirot knelt beside her, his fingers searching for a pulse, but there was none. The boathouse, once a stage for a game, was now a crime scene. The 9th hour had come early, and the shadowy bandit had struck. Poirot's little grey cells burned with resolve. This was no longer a game of clues and ciphers. It was murder, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the truth was unmasked. Chapter 4. The Syndicate's First Clue. The sun dipped below the rolling hills of Nasse House, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Nasse House. The gala, now in its second day, pulsed with an electric hum, as if the estate itself sensed the undercurrent of menace beneath its glittering surface. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dew-kissed grass, stood apart from the throng of guests, his keen eyes scanning the crowd. The air carried the mingled scents of lavender and champagne, but to Poirot there was a faint whiff of something else. Deception, sharp and acrid, like ink spilled on a ledger. Inspector Bland, a sturdy man with a face like weathered granite, had arrived with his constables, their boots trampling the rosebeds as they cordoned off the boathouse, where young Marlene Tucker had met her grim fate. The gala's festive mood had fractured. Whispers of murder slithered through the crowd, curling around crystal flutes and silk gowns. Yet the event pressed on, as if denial could stitch the evening back together. Poirot, however, was not one to be swayed by pretense. His little grey cells, as he called them, were already weaving threads of evidence into a tapestry of suspicion. Ariadne Oliver, her auburn hair escaping its pins in a frazzled halo, hurried toward him, clutching a crumpled gala programme. "Poirot, it's madness!" she hissed, her voice low but trembling with urgency. "The police are questioning everyone, but they're missing it. The pattern. I swear this isn't just about poor Marlene. There's something bigger, something orchestrated." Her eyes darted to the guests who milled about like actors awaiting their cues. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Madame Oliver, you speak of patterns, but patterns require clues. What, precisely, do you see?" She thrust the program into his hands, her finger jabbing at a smudged line of text. "Follow the 9th hour, where shadows cast no light." "This," she said, "it's part of the murder hunt clues I wrote, but I didn't write this. Someone's tampered with it, slipped it in, and look." She flipped the program over, revealing a faint sketch of dots and lines scratched in black ink. "It's the same as that paper you found on the platform." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he studied the symbols. They were not random. They formed a cipher, one he recognized from his studies of historical smuggling rings, an 18th century code used by thieves to mark their caches. "Most curious," he murmured, his fingers tracing the dots. "This is no mere prank, madame. This is a message, and it speaks of theft as much as murder." The gala's centerpiece loomed ahead. The Grand Marquis, its canvas glowing gold under strings of lanterns. Inside, guests swirled in a kaleidoscope of velvet and satin, their laughter brittle as they tried to outrun the spectre of death. Poirot, with Ariadne trailing, slipped into the tent, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Sir George Stubbs, the estate's jovial host, stood on a dais, toasting the guests with a glass of Burgundy, his smile as polished as his cufflinks. Beside him, Lady Stubbs, her beauty as fragile as porcelain, clutched a fan, her eyes flickering toward the tent's shadowed corners. Poirot's attention snagged on a trio of figures near the dessert table. The first was Mr. Devereux, Sir George's business partner, whose tailored suit did little to hide the nervous tick in his jaw. The second, a wiry auctioneer named Mr. Pennington, adjusted his spectacles with ink-stained fingers, his gaze darting to a locked case holding the gala's auction prize, a 15th-century Book of Hours. Its gilded pages said to hold secrets of medieval alchemists. The third was a gardener, Mr. Cobb, whose calloused hands seemed ill-suited to the delicate pruning shears he carried, his eyes lingering too long on the case. "Observe, madame," Poirot whispered to Ariadne, nodding toward the trio. "Each carries a secret, like a pocketful of stones, but which is the heaviest?" Ariadne frowned, clutching her shawl. "You think one of them killed Marlene? Or all of them?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Not all secrets lead to murder, but all murders lead to secrets. We must find the thread that binds them." As the evening deepened, Poirot drifted toward the auction case, its glass catching the lantern light like a prism. The Book of Hours lay open to a page of illuminated script, its Latin text curling around a miniature of a hooded figure holding a sapphire. Poirot's pulse quickened. The sapphire pendant stolen from a nearby estate, mentioned in the coded note from Chapter 2, bore an eerie resemblance to the book's illustration. Was this a coincidence, or a deliberate taunt from the shadowy bandit? He knelt, inspecting the case's lock, a modern contraption, yet oddly scratched as if tampered with. A faint smudge of ink marred the glass, and Poirot's fingers brushed it, noting its tacky texture. Fresh, not yet dry. His eyes narrowed. "The syndicate," he murmured. "They are here, and they are bold." Ariadne, hovering nearby, caught his words. "Syndicate? You mean those thefts you mentioned, the ones across Devon and Cornwall? You think they're connected to Marlene's death?" Poirot straightened, his voice low but firm. "Madame, a girl is dead, a sapphire is stolen, and a book of inestimable value sits like bait in a trap. These are not separate threads, but strands of the same web. The question is, who spins it?" The Marquis's atmosphere shifted as a string quartet struck up a mournful waltz, the notes weaving through the chatter like a warning. Poirot's gaze settled on Mr. Pennington, who was now whispering to a waiter. A young man with mismatched gloves, one black, one grey. The same waiter Poirot had noted in Chapter 2, slipping through the crowd with unnatural ease. The waiter's tray held flutes of champagne, but his eyes held something else. Calculation, sharp as a blade. Poirot approached, his demeanour disarming. "Monsieur, a fine evening, no? The champagne, it is exquisite, but I wonder, do you serve anything less visible?" He gestured subtly to the waiter's gloves, his smile polite, but piercing. The waiter stiffened, his tray wobbling. "Just doing my job, sir," he muttered, retreating into the crowd. But Poirot had seen enough. A faint bulge in the waiter's pocket, the outline of a folded paper. Another coded message, perhaps? Before Poirot could pursue, a commotion erupted near the dais. Sir George, his face flushed, was arguing with Mr. Devereux, their voices low but heated. "You promised discretion," Devereux hissed, his tic more pronounced. Sir George waved him off, but his eyes darted to Lady Stubbs, who had vanished into the crowd. Poirot's instincts flared. He slipped away from the marquee, following a gravel path to the estate's library. A grand room of mahogany shelves and leather-bound tomes, its air thick with the scent of old paper. The library was empty, save for a single lamp casting a golden pool on a reading table. There, half hidden beneath a stack of gala programs, was a book on ciphers, its spine cracked open to a page on 18th century smuggling codes. The same dots and lines from Ariadne's program stared back at him, annotated in fresh ink. Poirot's heart raced as he traced the annotations. They formed a map, not of Nasse House, but of the gala's auction stage. A circled note read 9th hour, 3rd lot. The auction was set to begin at 8 o'clock, with the Book of Hours as the 3rd item. The 9th hour was imminent. He hurried back to the marquee, the gala program now a burning weight in his pocket. The auction was minutes away, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Mr. Pennington stood at the podium, his spectacles glinting as he described the first lot. A silver candelabrum, a steal at £500. The guests laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Poirot found Ariadne near the stage, her face pale. "Poirot, I saw Lady Stubbs. She was slipping something to that waiter. The one with the gloves. A note, I think." Poirot's mind raced, connecting the dots. The waiter, the coded messages, the tampered lock, Lady Stubbs's nervous glances, all pointed to a heist, orchestrated not by a lone bandit, but by a syndicate weaving its tendrils through Nasse House. Marlene's death, he realized, was no accident. She had overheard something, perhaps the 9th hour plan, and paid the ultimate price. As the second lot, a jade figurine, went under the gavel, Poirot's eyes locked on the Book of Hours. The case was untouched, but the ink smudge on the glass seemed darker, fresher. He leaned toward Ariadne, his voice a whisper. "Madame, the book is the key. If it vanishes tonight, the syndicate wins. We must act." The auctioneer's voice boomed. "Lot 3, the Book of Hours, a masterpiece of medieval artistry. Bidding starts at £10,000. The crowd surged forward, bids flying like sparks. Poirot's gaze flicked to the waiter, now stationed near a side exit, his mismatched gloves stark against his black tray. Lady Stubbs reappeared, her fan fluttering like a trapped bird, her eyes fixed on the case. Mr. Devereux, too, hovered near the stage, his tic betraying his calm facade. Poirot's hand closed around the gala programme, the cipher's warning clear. 9th hour, 3rd lot. The clock struck 9, its chimes swallowed by the auction's fervour. Then a flicker, a shadow moving behind the case, too swift to be natural. Poirot's heart pounded. The syndicate was here, and they were moving. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din. "Monsieur Pennington, a moment!" The auctioneer paused, startled, as Poirot approached the case. "I wish to inspect the lot, if I may. A precaution, you understand." The crowd murmured, sensing drama. Pennington hesitated, then nodded, unlocking the case with a key that trembled in his ink-stained fingers. Poirot lifted the Book of Hours, its weight reassuring, but his fingers brushed a faint seam, a false page hollowed out. Inside, a scrap of paper bore the same cryptic symbols, and beneath them, a single word, Greystone, the name struck like a thunderclap. Greystone was no stranger. It was the alias of a smuggler Poirot had pursued years ago, a mastermind who vanished into Europe's underworld. The syndicate's leader, perhaps, or a decoy. Before Poirot could speak, the lights flickered, plunging the Marquis into darkness. Gasps filled the air, followed by a crash. The case toppled. When the lanterns flared back to life, the Book of Hours was gone, and the waiter with the mismatched gloves had vanished. Poirot's eyes blazed with resolve. "The syndicate has struck," he said to Ariadne, who clutched his arm, her face ashen. "But they have left a clue. This Greystone, he is the key, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find him." The chapter closed with the gala in chaos, guests whispering of theft and murder, the storm outside breaking with a crack of thunder. Poirot stood motionless, the ciphered note in his hand, his mind racing towards the next move. The syndicate had played their hand, but the game was far from over. Chapter 5. The Auction's Hidden Stakes. The grand hall of Nasse House pulsed with anticipation, its chandeliers casting prisms of light that danced across the polished parquet floor. The air was thick with the scent of tuberose and polished silver, mingling with the faint tang of nervous sweat from the assembled crowd. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit with a crimson pocket square, stood at the edge of the throng, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The charity auction, the gala's centerpiece, was about to begin, and the stakes, Poirot sensed, were far higher than the bids for rare artifacts. The hall was a spectacle of opulence, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, their threads glinting in the candlelight. A long table at the front groaned under the weight of the auction items. A jade figurine from the Ming dynasty, a silver candelabrum said to have graced Versailles, and the star of the evening, a 15th century Book of Hours, its gilded pages shimmering like a captive sunrise. The book, encased in a velvet-lined glass box, drew gasps from the guests, their whispers buzzing like bees around a honeypot. Poirot, however, was not swayed by its beauty. His little grey cells hummed with suspicion, for he had decoded a cipher earlier that day, hidden in a gala programme, that marked this very book as the next target of a shadowy syndicate. The auctioneer, a wiry man named Mr. Haverford, with a waxed moustache that twitched like a metronome, took his place at the podium. His voice, smooth as aged brandy, cut through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nasse House charity auction, where history meets generosity. Let us begin with Lot 1, a delicate jade figurine." Poirot tuned out the patter, his gaze flitting across the room. He noted Sir George Stubbs, the estate's jovial host, laughing too loudly with a group of financiers, his ruddy cheeks flushed with wine. Lady Stubbs, his enigmatic wife, was conspicuously absent, her absence a nagging thorn in Poirot's mind. She had been nervous all evening, her sapphire eyes darting toward the boathouse where young Marlene Tucker had met her grim fate the previous day. Poirot adjusted his disguise, a bidder's paddle with a false number, procured with Ariadne Oliver's reluctant help. Ariadne, hovering near a tray of champagne flutes, shot him a worried glance. Her flamboyant hat, adorned with peacock feathers, bobbed as she whispered to a guest, no doubt fretting about the bad feeling she'd confessed to Poirot earlier. The detective's lips twitched in a faint smile. Ariadne's intuition, though theatrical, had a knack for sniffing out trouble. The crowd was a kaleidoscope of wealth and ambition. A dowager in a sable stole clutched her pearls, her eyes gleaming with acquisitive zeal. A young man in a velvet blazer, his paddle number suspiciously pristine, bid aggressively on a minor lot, his movements too precise, too rehearsed. Poirot's gaze lingered on a maid weaving through the crowd, her tray of canapés a flimsy excuse for her lingering near the auction table. She slipped a folded note to Haverford, who pocketed it without breaking his patter. Poirot's moustache quivered. A message, perhaps, or a signal? Outside, the night pressed against the tall windows, a storm brewing in the distance. Thunder rumbled, low and ominous, as if nature itself sensed the undercurrent of danger. The bidding for the Book of Hours began, and the room crackled with energy. "Lot 12, Haverford announced, his voice rising. A 15th-century Book of Hours, illuminated by the monks of Bruges, its pages a testament to devotion and artistry. Shall we start at £50,000? Paddles shot up like startled birds. Poirot raised his own, not to bid but to blend in, his eyes locked on the crowd. The young man in the velvet, blazer bid fiercely, his voice clipped and foreign. A woman in a crimson gown, her face half hidden by a fan, countered with a cool 100,000. The dowager gasped, her pearls clicking as she shook her head. Sir George, now standing near the auction table, clapped enthusiastically, but his eyes flicked toward the door, as if expecting someone, or something. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The cipher he'd found, a series of dots and lines etched into a programme, matched a smuggler's code from the 18th century. One used to coordinate thefts across Europe. The sapphire pendant stolen from a nearby estate, the cryptic symbols on the boathouse wall, the whispered mention of a shadowy bandit, all pointed to a syndicate operating under the gala's glittering facade. The Book of Hours, with its priceless illuminations, was no mere auction lot. It was bait, a lure for a thief bold enough to strike in plain sight. The bidding climbed to £200,000, the room a fever of excitement. Poirot noticed a waiter, his gloves mismatched, one white, one black, hovering near the glass case. The waiter's movements were too deliberate, his tray of champagne untouched. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A distraction was coming, he was certain. He edged closer to the auction table, his cane tapping softly on the floor, a gentleman out for a stroll, nothing more. Haverford's gavel hovered, his voice soaring. 250,000! Do I hear 260? The lights flickered. A brief stutter that drew gasps from the crowd. In that heartbeat of darkness, Poirot saw it. The waiter's hand darting toward the glass case, a glint of metal, a key perhaps or a tool. The lights snapped back on, and the waiter was gone, melted into the crowd. Poirot's heart quickened, but he remained still, his face a mask of calm. The bidding paused as Haverford adjusted his glasses, unaware of the near theft. Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on the maid, now stationed near a side door. She clutched her tray, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the auction table. Poirot followed her line of sight to the Book of Hours, still secure in its case, or was it? He stepped closer, his cane brushing the velvet rope around the display. The case's lock gleamed, but a faint scratch marred its surface, a hairline fracture invisible to the untrained eye. Poirot's lips pursed. The syndicate had made their move, or so they thought. The storm outside broke, rain lashing the windows, a drumroll of nature's wrath. The crowd barely noticed, enthralled by the auction's climax. 300,000! The young man in the velvet blazer shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. The woman in crimson countered, her fan snapping shut. Poirot, however, was focused on the case. He leaned closer, his fingers brushing the glass, and saw it. A faint seam, a panel designed to slide open from within. The Book of Hours was a decoy, realized a clever replica meant to distract from the real theft. He glanced at Sir George, whose jovial mask had slipped, his eyes darting to the side door where the maid stood. Poirot's mind clicked like a well-oiled lock. The syndicate's plan was not to steal the book during the auction, but to replace it, to let the bidding frenzy mask their sleight of hand. The real Book of Hours was already gone, spirited away in the flicker of the lights, the waiter's deft hand the key to the ruse. Haverford's gavel slammed down. Sold for £320,000 to the gentleman in lot 47. The crowd erupted in applause, but Poirot was already moving, slipping through the throng toward the side door. The maid saw him coming and bolted, her tray clattering to the floor. Poirot, surprisingly nimble for a man of his stature, pursued, his cane a steady rhythm against the chaos. The door led to a service corridor, its walls damp and shadowed, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and conspiracy. The maid vanished around a corner, but Poirot paused, his eyes catching a glint on the floor. A hairpin, engraved with the same cryptic dots and lines he'd found on the boathouse wall. He pocketed it, his mind racing. The syndicate was bold, but sloppy, leaving trails like breadcrumbs for a detective of his caliber. He returned to the hall, where the crowd was dispersing, the Book of Hours still in its case, now being wheeled away by Haverford's assistants. Poirot's eyes followed the case, noting the faint scratch on its lock, the same symbol he'd seen on the hairpin. Ariadne appeared at his side, her feathers trembling. "Poirot, did you see it? The lights, the chaos, it's all wrong." Her voice was a stage whisper, loud enough to draw curious glances. Poirot raised a finger to his lips, his eyes twinkling with purpose. "Madame Oliver," he said softly, "the game is afoot, but the players are not as clever as they believe. The Book of Hours is gone, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived." He turned back to the hall, where Sir George was now deep in conversation with the young man in the velvet blazer, their heads bent close. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the tapestries, casting shadows that seemed to writhe with secrets. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, his mind a whirl of ciphers and motives. The syndicate had struck, but they had not counted on him. The auction was over, but the real game was just beginning. Chapter 6. A Trail of Red Herrings. The morning after the auction's audacious theft, Nasse House lay under a shroud of mist, its manicured lawns glistening with dew. The gala, now tainted by the shadow of Marlene Tucker's murder and the vanishing of the Book of Hours, had lost its sparkle. Yet the guests lingered, their whispers buzzing like flies over a wound. Hercule Poirot, his bowler hat tilted against the damp, stood at the edge of the estate's rose garden, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The air carried the scent of wet earth and fading roses, but beneath it a faint metallic tang lingered, a reminder of the blood spilled in the boathouse. Poirot's mind, a finely tuned instrument, hummed with the discord of the case. The cryptic symbols, dots and lines etched into paper wood, and now his memory pointed to a syndicate, a shadowy network weaving theft and murder into the gala's glittering facade. The stolen sapphire pendant, the coded messages, and Marlene's death were threads in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. But the syndicate was clever, scattering red herrings like confetti to obscure their trail. Poirot, however, was not a man to be misled by false scents. Ariadne Oliver, her scarf a riot of crimson silk, joined him. Her face pale, but her eyes blazing with determination. "Hercule, I can't shake it," she said, her voice low, almost lost in the mist. "That saffron veil. Someone mentioned it during the murder hunt rehearsals. A woman, I think, whispering about it, as if it were a secret code. I thought it was part of the game. But now—" She trailed off, her fingers twisting the scarf's edge. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign his little grey cells were at work. "Madame Oliver, you have the nose of a bloodhound for the unusual. This saffron veil, it is no mere costume piece, I think. It is a signal, a marker, perhaps even a cipher in itself. We must follow where it leads." He turned his gaze to the woods beyond the estate, where the trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with fog. The murder hunt's clues had directed players to the woods, a labyrinth of oaks and brambles designed to confuse. Poirot suspected the syndicate had used the game's structure to hide their own movements. "Come, madame," he said, adjusting his coat. "The trail begins here." The woods were a world apart from the gala's opulence. Sunlight struggled through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that danced like spectres. The ground was soft, carpeted with moss and fallen leaves, muffling their steps. Ariadne, less accustomed to such terrain, clutched Poirot's arm as they navigated a narrow path marked by a series of wooden stakes. Each stake bore a carved symbol, dots and lines, identical to those Poirot had found on the platform and in the gala programme. "It's like a treasure hunt," Ariadne muttered, her voice half admiring, half apprehensive. "But for what?" "For truth, madame," Poirot replied, pausing to examine a stake. The symbols were deliberate, not decorative, their arrangement suggesting a sequence. He traced them with a gloved finger, his mind racing. "These are not random. They are a cipher, perhaps a variation of the Pigpen Code, used by smugglers in centuries past. The syndicate, they are bold to revive such a method." As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, the mist thicker. The path led to a clearing where a crumbling stone well stood, its mouth yawning like a silent scream. A scrap of fabric, saffron-hued, caught on a thorn bush nearby, fluttered in the breeze. Ariadne gasped. "The veil! It's just as I heard. Saffron, like the one in the performance." Poirot approached the well, his eyes narrowing. The ground around it was disturbed, as if recently trodden. Kneeling, he brushed away leaves to reveal a faint outline in the dirt, a trapdoor, its edges cleverly concealed. With effort, he lifted it, revealing a shallow cache beneath. His heart quickened, but the cache was empty, save for a single item. A glove, black leather, its cuff stained with ink. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "Another red herring, but one that speaks." Ariadne peered over his shoulder. "Ink? Like the gardener's hands. Mr. Ledger, wasn't it? He was at the gala, always hovering near the library." Poirot nodded, pocketing the glove. "Monsieur Ledge, with his ink-stained fingers, is a man of interest. But this glove, it is too convenient, too perfectly placed. The syndicate wishes us to chase shadows, to suspect the obvious. We must be wary, madame, for the truth lies not in what is shown, but in what is hidden." Their return to Nasse House was marked by a growing sense of urgency. The gala's final day loomed, and with it, the syndicate's next move. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments, the saffron veil, the empty cache, the glove, and the coded stakes. The library, with its shelves of ancient books, beckoned as the next logical step. If the syndicate was using ciphers, they might have drawn inspiration from the estate's collection. The library was a cathedral of knowledge, its oak shelves groaning under leather-bound tomes. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through stained-glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the floor. Poirot moved with purpose, his fingers trailing over spines until he paused at a worn volume, Cryptographia Antiqua, a 17th-century treatise on codes. He opened it, revealing pages yellowed but intact, their margins filled with handwritten notes, dots and lines mirroring the stake's symbols. "Voilà," Poirot said, his voice a mix of triumph and caution. "The syndicate, they are not so original. They borrow from history, adapting old methods to modern crimes. This book, it is their blueprint." Ariadne, flipping through a nearby ledger, frowned. "Hercule, look at this. A guest list from the gala, but someone circled names in red ink. And here, a note, saffron at midnight. Does that mean tonight?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Midnight, madame, is the hour of secrets. The saffron veil, the coded stakes, the empty cache, they are all distractions, leading us away from the true prize. But this note, it is a slip, a crack in their armor. Tonight we shall be ready." As evening fell, Nasse House transformed into a theatre of anticipation. The gala's penultimate event, a torchlit dance, filled the gardens with music and laughter. But Poirot and Ariadne were elsewhere, their focus on the village post office. A tip from a nervous maid had led them there, where a telegram, intercepted by Inspector Bland, awaited. The postmaster, a wiry man with trembling hands, handed it over under Poirot's piercing gaze. The message was brief, encoded in the same cipher. "Greystone meets saffron. Midnight, Rose Garden." Greystone, Poirot mused, his voice low. "A name I know. A smuggler from a case long past, but perhaps an alias now. The Rose Garden. It is the stage for their next act." The Rose Garden, bathed in moonlight, was a labyrinth of shadows and scents. Thorns glinted like tiny daggers, and the air was heavy with the perfume of late-blooming roses. Poirot and Ariadne took their positions behind a trellis, their breaths shallow to avoid detection. The clock tower chimed midnight, each note echoing like a heartbeat. Then, movement, a figure in a hooded cloak, followed by another, a woman draped in a saffron shawl. Their voices were hushed, but Poirot's keen ears caught fragments. "The talk, museum, final heist." Ariadne gripped Poirot's arm, her nails digging in. He raised a finger to his lips, his eyes locked on the figures. The hooded man, his voice sharp, said, "Greystone demands delivery by dawn." No mistakes. The woman nodded, her shawl slipping to reveal a glint of metal, a knife tucked into her belt. Poirot's heart raced, not with fear but with the thrill of the chase. The syndicate was bold, meeting under his nose, but they had underestimated Hercule Poirot. As the figures parted, the woman's shawl caught on a rosebush, tearing free. They vanished into the mist, unaware of the trapdoor's echo in Poirot's mind, the empty cache, the glove, the red herrings all pointing to this moment. He stepped forward, retrieving the torn shawl. It was heavy, weighted by something sewn into the hem. With a flick of his pocket-knife, he revealed a key, its surface etched with the familiar dots and lines. "The key to the museum," he whispered, his voice alive with certainty. "The Celtic talk, it is their prize, and midnight has revealed their plan." Ariadne's eyes widened. "Hercule, what now? They're moving tonight." "We prepare, madame," Poirot said, his moustache curling with resolve. "The syndicate believes they have outwitted us with their red herrings, but they have left a trail of truth. The museum, the talk Greystone, these are the pieces. Tomorrow we shall turn their game against them." The chapter closed with the moon dipping below the horizon, the rose garden silent once more. Poirot clutched the key, his mind a whirl of ciphers and clues, ready to unravel the syndicate's final act. The trail of red herrings had led him here, but it was the truth, hidden in plain sight, that would bring the Gala Gore to its end. Chapter 7. Midnight in the garden. The moon hung low over Nasse House, a silver disk, casting a spectral glow across the sprawling gardens of Nasse House. Its light wove through the trellises, dappling the rose beds with shadows that seemed to writhe like conspirators. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes silent on the dew-kissed grass, moved with the precision of a cat stalking prey. His heart thrummed not with fear, but with the electric anticipation of discovery. His little grey cells humming as they pieced together the Gala's sinister puzzle. The cryptic telegram he'd intercepted hours ago, midnight rose garden 9th trellis, had been a beacon, pulling him into the night's embrace. The air was thick with the scent of late-blooming roses, their perfume mingling with the faint tang of earth, and something sharper, like metal left too long in the rain. Poirot's gloved fingers brushed the brim of his hat, tilting it slightly to shield his eyes from the moon's glare. He had chosen a vantage point behind the 9th trellis, a lattice choked with climbing roses, their thorns glinting like tiny daggers. The Gala's revelry had faded hours ago, leaving only the hum of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl, its call slicing through the stillness like a warning. Poirot's mind churned over the clues amassed thus far. The coded symbols on the scrap of paper from the train platform, the stolen sapphire pendant, the murdered girl guide, Marlene Tucker, her lifeless form in the boathouse, a grim echo of the Gala's mock murder hunt. Each thread wove into a tapestry of deception, with a shadowy figure, the bandit Marlene had whispered of, lurking at its heart. The telegram, its ink smudged but legible, had hinted at a meeting, a clandestine exchange under the cover of night. Poirot's instincts told him this was no mere tryst. It was the syndicate's next move, a step toward the final heist Ariadne Oliver had overheard in her nervous eavesdropping. A rustle broke his reverie, faint but deliberate, like silk brushing against leaves. Poirot's breath caught, his body still as stone. From the shadows emerged two figures, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit path. One was tall, cloaked in a hooded cape that swallowed the light, moving with the predatory grace of a panther. The other, shorter, wore a saffron shawl that shimmered like liquid gold, its edges fluttering as if caught in a breeze that did not exist. They paused beneath the 10th trellis, their voices low, urgent, the words slithering through the night air. Greystone's impatient, the hooded figure hissed, his voice gravelly, accented with a hint of the continent, perhaps Dutch or Flemish. The talk must be secured by dawn, or the entire network collapses. The woman in the saffron shawl shifted, her hands twisting the fabric as if it were a noose. "The Belgian's here," she whispered, her voice trembling but sharp. "He's sniffing too close. If he finds the ledger—" "He won't," the man snapped, his tone slicing through her words. "The study's locked. The cipher's unbreakable. Stick to the plan. The museum's alarms are rigged, and the decoy's in place. By tomorrow, the talk will be in Amsterdam, and we'll be dust in the wind." Poirot's pulse quickened. Greystone. The name struck a chord, a faint memory from a case years ago, a smuggler's alias linked to a ring of black-market antiquities dealers operating out of Antwerp. His mind raced, connecting the dots. The stolen sapphire, the Book of Hours vanishing at the auction, and now a Celtic talk, a priceless artifact housed in the nearby Dartmoor Museum. The syndicate's ambition was breathtaking. A web of theft spun across England's grandest estates, each crime cloaked in the elegance of high society. The woman's voice dropped lower, almost inaudible. "What about the girl? Marlene, she saw too much." The man's laugh was cold, like ice cracking underfoot. "She's silenced. No more loose ends. Now focus. The talk is our last play here. Greystone's orders are clear. No mistakes." Poirot's fingers tightened around the trellis, a thorn pricking through his glove, a sharp reminder of the stakes. Marlene's murder was no accident, no spur-of-the-moment panic. It was calculated, a thread snipped to protect the syndicate's secrets. His mind flashed to her pale face, the rope around her neck, the boathouse's dank air. Anger flared, but he tamped it down, channeling it into focus. The syndicate's arrogance would be their undoing. Poirot would see to it. The figures moved closer, their shadows merging into a single dark mass. The woman reached into her shawl, producing a small object, a key, its surface catching the moonlight, revealing etched symbols that matched the cryptic code Poirot had found on the train platform. His heart leapt. The key was the linchpin, a tangible link to the syndicate's operations. If he could seize it. A twig snapped under his foot, the sound a gunshot in the silence. The figures froze, their heads snapping toward the trellis. Poirot held his breath, his body pressed against the lattice, the thorns digging into his coat. The hooded man's hand darted to his pocket, and Poirot glimpsed the glint of steel, a knife, perhaps, or something worse. The woman's eyes, wide and gleaming, scanned the darkness. Her shawl slipping to reveal a cascade of dark hair, and a face pale with fear. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice a blade of its own. The man raised a hand, silencing her. "Quiet. It's probably just a fox." But his tone was taut, his body coiled like a spring. He took a step toward the trellis, the knife now visible, its blade catching the moonlight like a cruel smile. Poirot's mind raced. Exposure now would ruin everything. His presence would scatter the syndicate like roaches, and the key would vanish into the night. He needed a diversion, something to shift their focus. His eyes darted to the ground, spotting a loose stone half buried in the earth. With the precision of a conjurer, he nudged it with his toe, sending it skittering across the path, toward a nearby hedge. The sound was subtle, but enough. A rustle mimicking a fleeing animal. The man's head whipped toward the hedge, his knife lowering slightly. "See? Nothing. Let's move. We've lingered too long." The woman hesitated, her gaze lingering on the trellis, but she nodded, clutching the key tightly. They turned, their footsteps fading as they slipped toward the estate's outer gate. Poirot waited, counting 10 heartbeats before easing from his hiding spot. His coat snagged on a thorn, a small price for his survival. He crept forward, his eyes locked on the ground where the figures had stood. The moonlight revealed a faint imprint in the grass, a heel mark, narrow and pointed, suggesting the woman's shoes were not those of a casual gala guest, but something more deliberate, perhaps custom-made for stealth. Then he saw it. A glint in the grass, half hidden by a rose petal, He knelt, his fingers brushing aside the dew-soaked blades to reveal the key, dropped in the woman's haste. Its surface was cold, heavy, the etched symbols, a series of dots and lines gleaming like a cipher carved by moonlight. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The syndicate's carelessness was his gain. He pocketed the key, his mind already racing ahead. The mention of the Dartmoor Museum and the Celtic talk confirmed the syndicate's next target. The talk, a golden crescent of ancient craftsmanship, was no mere trinket. It was a symbol of power, coveted by collectors and criminals alike. Its theft would be the syndicate's crowning achievement, a final flourish before they vanished into the shadows of Europe's black market. But Poirot was no ordinary adversary. The key, the ledger, the name Greystone, they were pieces of a puzzle he would assemble with surgical precision. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that promised a storm. Poirot straightened, adjusting his hat, his silhouette cutting a sharp figure against the moonlit roses. The garden, so serene by day, was now a stage for secrets. Its beauty a mask for treachery. He turned toward Nasse House, its windows dark save for a single light flickering in the east wing, Sir George's study perhaps, or another clue waiting to be uncovered. The night was far from over. Poirot's steps were measured, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The syndicate believed themselves untouchable, their ciphers unbreakable, their plans flawless. But they had not reckoned with Hercule Poirot, whose little grey cells thrived on the impossible. The talk would not reach Amsterdam, not while he drew breath. The key in his pocket was more than metal. It was the first crack in the syndicate's armour, and Poirot would pry it open until their empire crumbled. As he slipped back toward the house, the first raindrops fell, cold and sharp, like the truth he would soon unveil. The Gala Gore had only begun, and the Midnight Garden had given him the weapon he needed to end it. Chapter 8. The museum's deadly trap. The night air hung heavy with the scent of rain-soaked stone, as Hercule Poirot slipped through the shadowed alley behind the Nasse House Museum. The building loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade a pale ghost under the flickering street lamps. The gala at Nasse House, with its glittering chandeliers and swirling costumes, felt a world away. Here, in the stillness of midnight, the only sounds were the distant drip of a gutter and the faint hum of electricity from the museum's security system. Poirot adjusted the coarse woolen cap of his borrowed cleaner's uniform, its itch a small price to pay for anonymity. His little grey cells thrummed with purpose. For tonight he was no guest of honour, but a hunter closing in on his prey. The shadowy syndicate behind Marlene Tucker's murder and the gala's audacious thefts. The Celtic talk, a golden crescent of ancient craftsmanship, was the syndicate's next target. Poirot had pieced this together from the cryptic key found in the rose garden, its engraved symbols matching those in the smuggler's cipher he'd decoded. The museum, a modest repository of local antiquities, was no fortress, but its simplicity belied the danger within. The syndicate, he knew, thrived on misdirection, and the tortoise display case, gleaming under a single spotlight in the main hall, was almost certainly a trap. Poirot's polished shoes, hidden beneath the cleaner's oversized boots, clicked softly on the cobblestones as he approached the service entrance. His heart beat steady, but his senses were razor-sharp, attuned to every rustle, every flicker in the dark. The service door, a slab of rusted steel, yielded to the key he'd borrowed from a distracted guard during the gala's chaos. Inside, the museum exhaled a breath of dust and polish, its corridors stretching into darkness. Poirot's flashlight beam danced across tiled floors, catching the glint of brass plaques and glass cases. The air was cool, heavy with the weight of history. Arrowheads, pottery shards, and faded tapestries chronicling Nasse past. But Poirot's focus was singular. The talk and the syndicate's plan to steal it. He moved silently, his cleaner's cart, stocked with mops and a concealed notebook, creaking faintly as he navigated the labyrinthine halls. The main exhibition room opened before him, a cavernous space lit by a single beam that bathed the Celtic talk in golden light. The artifact rested on a velvet cushion, its intricate knots and curves a testament to a forgotten artisan's skill. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Too perfect, too exposed. The syndicate, masters of theatricality, would not leave their prize so unguarded. He circled the case, his gloved fingers tracing the air above its surface, searching for signs of tampering. A faint scratch on the glass caught his eye, a tiny deliberate mark in the shape of a crescent moon, identical to the symbols on the key. His pulse quickened. The trap was here, but where? He knelt, inspecting the case's base. A thin wire, nearly invisible, snaked from the pedestal to a junction box beneath a nearby display of Iron Age tools. Poirot's lips curved into a grim smile. A pressure sensor, likely rigged to trigger an alarm, or something worse, if the talk was lifted. He followed the wire, his flashlight revealing a second device. A small black box taped beneath the junction, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat. Not an alarm, but a detonator. The syndicate played for high stakes, willing to destroy evidence, and anyone who interfered. Poirot's mind raced. Disabling the device required precision, but time was short. The 9th hour from Marlene's overheard whisper was approaching, 3 a.m., if his calculations were correct. He retrieved a small toolkit from the cart, its contents pilfered from Sir George's study, during a discreet moment at the gala. With a jeweller's loop and a pair of wire cutters, he studied the detonator. The wiring was crude but effective, a tangle of red and blue threads feeding into a battery pack. Sweat beaded on his brow as he traced the circuit, his fingers steady despite the stakes. One wrong move, and the museum would become his tomb. The red wire was a decoy, he decided, noting its loose connection, a classic misdirection. The blue wire, taut and solid, was the key. With a delicate snip, he severed it. The red light blinked out, and the silence that followed was deafening. Poirot exhaled, his breath a soft cloud in the cool air. But the talk itself was another puzzle. He examined the case again, his flashlight revealing a faint seam along its base. A hidden compartment? He pressed gently, and the velvet cushion shifted, revealing a second talk beneath. An exquisite replica, its gold a shade too bright, its knots slightly asymmetrical. The real talk, he realized, had already been swapped, likely during the gala's chaos. The syndicate's efficiency was chilling, but their arrogance, leaving a decoy so obvious, gave Poirot an edge. He pocketed the replica, leaving the case undisturbed. The thieves would return, believing their plan intact, and Poirot would be waiting. He moved to the security room, a cramped closet of blinking monitors and humming servers. The guard, dozing in a chair, stirred as Poirot slipped past, his cleaner's uniform rendering him invisible. The monitors showed the museum's entrances, but one screen flickered, its feed looping a static image of the back door. Another syndicate trick. Poirot rewound the footage, his eyes scanning for anomalies. At 11:47 p.m., a shadow crossed the frame. A figure in a hooded cloak, moving with the grace of a panther. The shadowy bandit Ariadne had glimpsed. The figure paused, adjusting something near the door, a lock perhaps or another edged device. Poirot froze the image, noting a glint at the figure's wrist, a cufflink engraved with a crescent moon. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint click from the main hall. He doused the flashlight and pressed himself against the wall. His heart a steady drumbeat. Footsteps echoed. Deliberate and unhurried, accompanied by the soft jangle of keys. Poirot peered around the corner, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. A figure stood before the talker's case, cloaked in black, a saffron scarf trailing from their neck. The syndicate's operative, come to retrieve their prize. Poirot's hand tightened around the replica in his pocket. Confrontation was risky, but delay could cost him the trail. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. Mon ami, the talk you seek is not what it seems. The figure froze, then spun, a blade glinting in their hand. Poirot raised his hands, the replica gleaming in his palm. A decoy, n'est-ce pas? But the real treasure is elsewhere, and I, Hercule Poirot, nowhere. The figure lunged, their blades slicing the air. Poirot sidestepped, his agility belying his age, and the cleaner's cart became his shield, its metal frame deflecting the blow. The attacker stumbled, their scarf slipping to reveal a woman's face, sharp cheekbones, eyes blazing with fury. Poirot recognized her, the maid from the gala, the one who'd passed a note to the auctioneer. Mademoiselle, he said, his voice calm, your syndicate plays a dangerous game, but Poirot is no pawn. She hissed, raising the blade again, but a creak from the service entrance stopped her. Torchlight swept the hall. Security, alerted by the disabled detonator. The maid bolted, her cloak a dark blur as she vanished into a side corridor. Poirot let her go, knowing pursuit was futile. The syndicate's web was vast, but its threads were fraying. He turned to the display case, his flashlight catching a glint beneath the pedestal. A hidden panel, overlooked in his earlier search, clicked open under his touch. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with coded entries, dates, artifacts, and names. One entry leapt out. Sir George Stubbs, Nasse House, sapphire pendant, £50,000. The gala's host, a traitor in their midst. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Sir George, with his wealth and connections, was no mere pawn, but a linchpin in the syndicate's operations. The gala, the murder hunt, the thefts, all orchestrated to mask his role. Marlene's death, Poirot realized, was no accident but a silencing, her overheard whispers too close to the truth. The ledger was a prize worth more than gold, a map to the syndicate's heart. He tucked it into his coat, his resolve hardening. The museum was safe, the trap disarmed, but the real battle lay ahead at Nasse House. As he slipped out the service door, the first drops of rain kissed his face. The storm was coming, but Poirot welcomed it. The syndicate's arrogance had given him the key, literally and figuratively, and he would use it to unmask them all. The night swallowed him as he disappeared into the alley. His silhouette, a promise of justice in the darkness. Chapter 9. The mask of motives, the air at Nasse House thrummed with a feverish pulse, as if the estate itself sensed the unravelling of its secrets. The gala's final event, the saffron masque, was about to begin, transforming the sprawling lawn into a stage of flickering shadows and whispered anticipation. Torches cast golden halos across the grass, their flames dancing in the twilight breeze, while a velvet sky stretched overhead, pinpricked with stars. Guests, draped in silks and satins, donned masks of peacocks, wolves, and gilded skulls, their laughter tinged with the nervous edge of a knight teetering on the brink of revelation. Hercule Poirot, his own face unmasked but his mind cloaked in calculation, stood at the edge of the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning the scene for the final threads of the syndicate's tapestry. The stage, a grand platform framed by ivy-wreathed columns, glowed under the soft flicker of 100 candles. At its centre stood a prop cage, its bars encrusted with glittering paste jewels that caught the light like a spider's web snaring fireflies. Actors in flowing saffron veils glided across the stage, their movements fluid yet precise, as if choreographed by some unseen hand. The performance was an allegory of deception. Ariadne Oliver had explained earlier, her voice trembling with unease. "It's about a thief who hides in plain sight," she'd said, her eyes darting toward the boathouse, where Marlene Tucker's body had been found. Poirot had nodded, his little grey cells humming. The saffron veils, the coded gestures, the very theme of the masque. It all echoed the smuggler's cipher he'd deciphered. A cipher that had led him from cryptic thefts to a shadowy bandit to the heart of a criminal syndicate. Now, as the first notes of a haunting violin pierced the air, Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Stubbs, who stood apart from the throng, her emerald gown shimmering like a beetle's carapace. Her mask, a delicate filigree of silver leaves, did little to hide the tension in her jaw or the way her fingers clutched her fan, as if it were a lifeline. Poirot had suspected her involvement since the auction, when the Book of Hours vanished under her absence. Her nervous glances, her whispered exchanges with the auctioneer, her sudden disappearance during key moments, all pointed to a woman ensnared, not empowered, by the syndicate's web. Tonight, he would unravel her role and through her expose the mastermind. The masque began with a flourish, the actors' veils swirling as they enacted a tale of a merchant betrayed by his kin. Their gestures were deliberate, each sweep of an arm or tilt of a head mirroring the cryptic symbols Poirot had found in the gala's clues. Dots and lines that formed a Fête smuggler's code. He leaned closer, his moustache twitching as he recognized a sequence. A raised hand, 2 fingers extended, followed by a slow circle of the wrist. It was the same pattern etched into the stolen sapphire pendant's case, a signal of intent. The actors weren't merely performing, they were communicating, passing messages in plain sight to the syndicate's operatives in the crowd. Poirot's eyes flicked to the guests, searching for accomplices. The nervous auctioneer, Mr. Wayman, stood near the stage, his mask askew, his fingers drumming against his thigh. The gardener Higgs lingered by a torch, his ink-stained hands betraying his role in forging the syndicate's documents. And there, at the far end of the lawn, was Sir George Stubbs, his lion mask gleaming with gold, his laughter too loud, too forced. Poirot's suspicion of Sir George had solidified in the museum, where the ledger revealed his name tied to a string of artifact thefts. But suspicion was not proof, and Poirot needed Lady Stubbs to bridge that gap. The music swelled, a crescendo of violins and cellos that masked the murmur of the crowd. Poirot slipped through the throng, his small frame weaving between towering figures in feathered capes and jewelled turbans. He reached Lady Stubbs just as the actors paused, their veils pooling like liquid gold on the stage. "Madame," he said softly, his voice cutting through the din like a scalpel. "A word, if you please." Lady Stubbs flinched, her fan snapping shut. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice a fragile thread. "This is hardly the time." "It is precisely the time," Poirot interrupted, his tone gentle but unyielding. "The mask. It tells a story, does it not? Of betrayal, of secrets hidden in plain view. I believe you know this story well." Her eyes, wide behind the mask, darted toward the stage, then back to him. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Poirot stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "The sapphire pendant, the Book of Hours, the Celtic talk, all stolen under the guise of this gala. And you, madame, are not the mastermind, but the pawn. Tell me, who pulls your strings?" A gasp escaped her, stifled by the sudden roar of applause as the actors struck a dramatic pose, one lifting a prop dagger aloft. Lady Stubbs's gaze flickered to the cage where a veiled figure now stood, motionless, as if waiting for a cue. "I can't," she whispered. "They'll kill me." "Who, madame?" Poirot pressed, his eyes locked on hers. "The shadowy bandit? Greystone? Or perhaps Sir George himself?" Her face paled, the silver mask glinting like a warning. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "It's not just George. It's bigger than him. The syndicate, they're everywhere. The gala, the mask, it's all a cover for their final move." Poirot's heart quickened, but his expression remained impassive. "And what is this final move?" Before she could answer, a drum roll thundered from the stage, and the crowd surged forward, drawn by the actor's sudden frenzy. The veiled figure in the cage began to chant, her words a lilting mix of English and nonsense, but Poirot caught fragments of the smuggler's code woven into the performance. 9. Saffron. Veil. The words were a signal, and he saw Mr. Wayman slip towards the edge of the lawn, his hand brushing against a hidden pocket. Poirot turned back to Lady Stubbs, but she was already moving, her gown a green blur as she darted toward the manor. He followed, his polished shoes silent on the grass, his mind racing. The mask was no mere performance. It was the syndicate's crescendo, their moment to execute a final theft or worse. The prop cage, the coded chants, the veiled figures, it all pointed to a spectacle designed to distract while the real crime unfolded. Inside Nasse House, the corridors were dim, lit only by flickering sconces. Lady Stubbs's footsteps echoed ahead, leading Poirot to a spiral staircase that descended to the manor's lower levels. He paused, his hand brushing against the key he'd found in the garden, its cryptic symbols matching those in Sir George's study. The study, where the syndicate's ledgers and stolen artifacts were likely hidden. Lady Stubbs was leading him there, whether by intent or panic. The staircase opened into a narrow hall, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Stubbs ancestors. Lady Stubbs stood at the far end, fumbling with a locked door. "Hattie!" Poirot called, using her given name to jolt her. "You cannot run from this. Tell me now, and I will protect you." She spun, her mask slipping to reveal tear-streaked cheeks. "It's too late," she sobbed. "They've planned it all. The mask. It's a diversion. They're taking the talk tonight, from the manor's vault. George, he made me help. He said they'd kill me if I didn't." Poirot's mind clicked into place. The Celtic talk, stolen from the museum but never recovered, was here, hidden in Nasse House. The syndicate had used the gala's chaos to smuggle it back, planning to spirit it away during the masque. Sir George, with his wealth and connections, was the linchpin, but Greystone, the shadowy bandit, remained the enigma. "Where is the vault?" Poirot demanded, his voice sharp. Lady Stubbs pointed to the door, her hands shaking. "Behind the study, there's a hidden panel, but they're already there. Higgs, Wayman, and him? Him?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Greystone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's not what you think. He's—" A crash from the stage above cut her off, followed by screams. The masque had reached its climax, and the crowd's cheers masked something darker. A scuffle, perhaps, or the syndicate's move. Poirot seized Lady Stubbs's arm, guiding her to the door. "Show me," he said, his tone brooking no argument. She unlocked the door with a key from her wrist, revealing Sir George's study. The room was a shrine to opulence. Mahogany panels, a crystal chandelier, and a massive desk strewn with papers. Poirot's eyes locked on a painting of a ship, its frame slightly askew. He pressed it, and a panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. Lady Stubbs hesitated, but Poirot's steady gaze propelled her forward. The passage led to a vault, its steel door ajar. Inside, Higgs and Wayman stood over a crate, the Celtic torque gleaming within, its gold coils catching the dim light. A third figure, cloaked in black, turned as Poirot entered. Greystone, his face obscured by a plain mask. "Monsieur Poirot," the figure said, his voice smooth as oil. "You're too late." Poirot smiled, a predator's smile. "On the contrary, I am precisely on time." He raised his voice, calling into the passage, "Inspector Bland, if you please!" Footsteps thundered as Bland and his men stormed in, their torches blinding the trio. Higgs dropped a crowbar. Wayman froze, and Greystone lunged for the torque. But Poirot was faster, tripping him with his cane. The masked figure fell, his mask clattering to reveal a face Poirot recognized. Not a stranger, but a minor guest, a supposed art dealer named Devereux, whose quiet demeanor had masked his role as Greystone. Lady Stubbs sank to her knees, sobbing. "I had no choice," she said. "George promised me safety, but it was all lies. The syndicate, they threatened my family." Poirot knelt beside her, his voice softening. "You have given me the final clue, madame. The talk, the ledgers, the codes, they all point to Sir George. He will face justice, and you will be protected." As Bland's men cuffed Higgs, Wayman, and Devereux, Poirot stepped back, his mind already piecing together the final confrontation. The mask above continued, its music a faint echo, but the real performance was here, in the vault, where the syndicate's curtain was falling. The chapter closed with Lady Stubbs's confession, a fragile thread that would lead Poirot to Sir George's study, and the unmasking of the gala's true mastermind. Chapter 10. The Bandit Unmasked. The air in Nasse House was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, a deceptive calm that masked the storm of secrets about to break. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of Sir George Stubbs's hidden study, his small polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The gala outside had dissolved into murmurs, the final notes of the saffron mask fading as guests dispersed, unaware of the drama unfolding within these walls. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the room. Mahogany panels gleamed under a single chandelier, a brass clock ticked ominously on the desk, and a heavy safe squatted in the corner, its iron face defiant. This was the heart of the syndicate's web. and Poirot was here to sever its threads, adjusted his bow tie, a ritual to steady his racing mind. The ledger from the museum, tucked under his arm, had been the key to this moment. Its cryptic entries, dates, artifacts, coded aliases, had pointed to Sir George as the linchpin of the shadowy operation. Lady Stubbs's tearful confession during the masque had confirmed it, her words spilling like wine from a cracked glass. "He made me do it, Poirot. The bandit. It's him." The bandit, a name whispered across Nasse House, was no mere thief, but the mastermind of a criminal syndicate looting England's estates. And now Poirot stood in the lair of the beast. The study was a monument to Sir George's hubris. Shelves sagged under leather-bound tomes, their spines embossed with gold, but Poirot's gaze fixed on a portrait above the fireplace. Sir George in hunting attire, his smile smug, a sapphire pendant pinned to his lapel, the same pendant stolen from a Dorset manor, flaunted as a trophy. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, "you have played a dangerous game." He moved to the desk where papers lay scattered like fallen leaves. A fountain pen, its nib stained with ink, rested beside a half-finished letter. Poirot's gloved fingers lifted it, his eyes narrowing at the familiar dots and lines, the smuggler's cipher that had haunted this case. The letter was a directive, addressed to Greystone, the alias Poirot had overheard in the Rose Garden. It detailed a shipment of artifacts to a Rotterdam dealer set for tomorrow night. The audacity! To orchestrate such a move while the gala glittered below was the mark of a man who believed himself untouchable. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "The little grey cells! They do not fail me," he said, slipping the letter into his pocket. A soft creak broke the silence. Poirot froze, his hand hovering over the desk. The sound came from behind the mahogany panel to his left, a panel too perfectly aligned, its edges betraying a seam. A hidden door. His pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of the chase. He pressed his ear to the wood, catching the faint shuffle of footsteps. Someone was there, and Poirot wagered it was Sir George, alerted by Lady Stubbs's betrayal. He glanced at the door to the hallway, where Inspector Bland's men waited, their boots muffled on the carpet. Time was short. With the precision of a watchmaker, Poirot tapped the panel, his fingers seeking a latch. A click rewarded his efforts, and the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage lit by a flickering bulb. The air was musty, tinged with the metallic tang of old coins. Poirot stepped inside, his cane tapping softly, and followed the passage to a small chamber. There, hunched over a table strewn with artifacts, a Celtic torque, a jade statuette, a filigreed dagger, stood Sir George Stubbs. The man's broad shoulders stiffened as he sensed Poirot's presence. He turned, his face a mask of false composure, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as polished oak, "what an unexpected visit! Care for a brandy?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Non, merci. I have no taste for the hospitality of a bandit." Sir George's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Bandit? A theatrical term, surely. I'm a businessman, nothing more." "A businessman who trades in stolen relics," Poirot countered, stepping closer. He held up the ledger, its pages damning. "This, Sir George, tells a different story. The sapphire pendant, the Book of Hours, the Celtic torque, all pilfered under the guise of your gala, and poor Marlene Tucker strangled to silence her eavesdropping. You are the puppeteer of this syndicate, no?" Sir George's smile faded, his hand inching toward a drawer. Poirot's cane snapped up, pointing like a rapier. "I would not, monsieur. The police are outside, and your escape is, how you say, impossible." The man's facade cracked. "You have no proof," he snarled, but his voice wavered. "A few trinkets, some coded nonsense. None of it ties to me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oh, but it does. The cipher, so cleverly hidden in your gala's programs, your letters, your ledgers. It is an old smuggler's code, one I have seen before. And this," he produced the key from the rose garden, its engraved symbols glinting. "This unlocks your safe, does it not? Shall we see what treasures it holds?" Sir George lunged, not for the drawer but for the table, grabbing the dagger. Poirot, anticipating the move, sidestepped with surprising agility for a man of his stature. "Inspector Bland," he called, his voice cutting through the chamber. Footsteps thundered, and within moments 2 constables burst through the passage, their truncheons raised. Sir George froze, the dagger clattering to the floor. "Take him," Poirot said, his tone calm but commanding. As the constables restrained Sir George, Poirot approached the safe. The key turned smoothly, and the door swung open to reveal a trove of stolen artifacts. A ruby-encrusted chalice, a Venetian mask, and the sapphire pendant from the portrait. But it was the papers that caught Poirot's eye. A dossier listing European contacts, bank accounts, and coded schedules. The syndicate's reach stretched far beyond Nasse House. A spiderweb of crime spun from this very room. "You thought yourself clever, Sir George," Poirot said, turning to the man now handcuffed between the constables. "But you underestimated Hercule Poirot. The little grey cells, they see what others miss. Your gala was a stage, your murder hunt a distraction, but the true crime was here, in your study, where you played the bandit." Sir George's defiance crumbled. "It wasn't just me," he spat. "Others, powerful others, will come for you, Poirot." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, unruffled, "but they will find only justice waiting." He nodded to the constables, who led Sir George away, his protests echoing down the passage. Alone now, Poirot examined the dossier. Each page was a thread in the syndicate's tapestry, linking thefts from Lisbon to Vienna. He deciphered the final cipher, a simple substitution code hidden in the dossier's margins, revealing a warehouse in Rotterdam where the artifacts were to be shipped. A quick call to Inspector Bland ensured Interpol would be waiting. The syndicate's European arm would collapse before dawn. As Poirot closed the safe, a faint noise drew his attention, a soft sob from the passage. He stepped back into the study to find Ariadne Oliver, her flamboyant scarf askew, her eyes red-rimmed. "Oh, Poirot," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have known it was him. All my instincts, my writer's nose for villainy, and I missed it." Poirot patted her arm, his touch gentle. "Non, Madame Oliver. Your instincts brought me here. Without your summons, this bandit would still roam free. You have played your part admirably," she sniffled, managing a smile. "You're too kind, but poor Marlene, and Lady Stubbs, caught in his web. Will she be all right?" "Madame Stubbs will face justice, but with leniency," Poirot said. "She was coerced, a pawn in Sir George's game. The courts will see this." They left the study, emerging into the cool night air. The gala's remnants, scattered streamers, overturned chairs, littered the lawn, a ghost of the evening's revelry. Poirot and Ariadne walked to the village where a small tea-room glowed with warmth. Over steaming cups of Earl Grey, they sat in companionable silence, the weight of the case settling like dust. "Tell me, Poirot," Ariadne said, stirring her tea, "how did you know it was Sir George?" The cipher, the pendant, the ledger, how did it all come together? Poirot leaned back, his moustache curling with satisfaction. "It is the method, madame, always the method. The little grey cells, they observe, they connect. The cipher was the key, its pattern repeated in every clue. The gala programmes, the notes, the ledger. Sir George, he was too proud, too bold, to hide his tracks well. The pendant in his portrait? A taunt? The coded letter? A boast? And the safe? It was his undoing. For no man hides such treasures unless he fears discovery." Ariadne shook her head, marvelling. "You're a wonder, Poirot. But what now? The syndicate's not finished, is it?" "For now, it is broken," Poirot said. "The Rotterdam shipment will be intercepted, the contacts named. The bandit is unmasked, and Nasse House is safe. As for the rest—" He sipped his tea, his eyes distant. "The world is full of mysteries, Madame Oliver. But for today, we have won." The sun dipped below the hills, casting a golden glow over Nasse House's thatched roofs. The tea-room's windows reflected the fading light, and Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The gala's gore had been laid bare, its secrets unravelled. Justice, as always, had prevailed. As they finished their tea, Ariadne raised her cup. "To Hercule Poirot," she said, "and his infuriatingly brilliant little grey cells." Poirot inclined his head, a twinkle in his eye. "And to you, madame, for the spark that lit the way. The village settled into dusk, its secrets buried, its peace restored." For Hercule Poirot, the case of Dead Man's Folly was closed, a triumph of order over chaos, of reason over greed. And somewhere, in the shadows of Europe, the syndicate's remnants trembled, knowing the little Belgian detective was never far behind.